What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. We have some fun stuff to talk about today. I'm really excited because we're going to get to start kind of talking about E3 already. I love that time of year when E3 comes up because it's just game announcement after game announcement, and it's a great time. We got a quick look at the preliminary floor plan, which we'll kind of take a bit of a look at because there's some interesting stuff there. And we hear more from Ubisoft about their financial earnings, and they kind of give us a look at where they're going to be going in the future, and then they give us a very specific look at digital versus retail cost, which a lot of people have asked. I mean, they go like down to the percentages, so this is pretty interesting to see. We're going to talk about that and more. Let's get started. So we're going to jump into E3 first. Of course, I think most of us know by now what E3 is. It's been going on forever. It's pretty much the one time of the year where everybody in the gaming industry comes together. Big companies show up, announce tons of games. That's usually where we get the big announcements from Sony, from Microsoft, from Nintendo, from Square, from Ubisoft, everybody. Pretty much everyone shows up. EA, even to the point, has their own conference basically that they do with the EA Play. And overall, it's a lot of fun to see all the new announcements and get some cool games to look forward to. Well, they put out preliminary, really, I guess, a setup. Now, this can change. It has before where it changes randomly in the weeks leading up to it, whether companies decide they can't make it, or they want more space, or they want less space. But this is a preliminary mock-up here, and the first thing you're going to notice is it's pretty clear. Nintendo and Sony are pretty much at it again. Last year, it was very similar to this as well, where Sony and Nintendo had some of the biggest spots. Sony looks to have probably the biggest spot this year again, as we'd expect, but Nintendo has a pretty large spot there directly across from them in the aisle, and that's always a lot of fun because when you see two companies like Sony and Nintendo who are very good at making first-party exclusive games, you know there's going to be some fireworks there, and you know there's going to be some competition there, so that's really exciting to see. And of course, if you're looking forward to E3, know that Sony and Nintendo appear to be showing up in full force as we'd expect. Sony, of course, has a bunch of meeting rooms that they'll use to meet with press, show off things behind closed doors. Nintendo also appears to be pretty much renting out the 411 Theater as usual to show off a bunch of cool stuff as well. It's going to be a good time. Now, you may have noticed there, you didn't really see Microsoft. They're actually on the other chart you're going to see here in the other hall, and you're going to notice how small, look at how small their section is here. This is something that seemed to confuse a lot of people. And I think it does make sense based on what Microsoft is trying to do here. One, they're not really developing a ton of first-party games as we know. They have their setup. They know what they're doing at the first party. I'd like to see some surprises, but I'm not counting on it. However, what Microsoft's probably going to do is what they did last year, where they pretty much have one spot rented out for their entire meeting that they're going to do, and that seems to be about it. They'll have meeting rooms, I'm sure, too, for different games. I would assume Crackdown, for example, is going to have some behind closed-door stuff to show off with an embargo set up and everything. But Microsoft will definitely have their whole big thing where they do on stage, probably show off a bunch of games, whether they're exclusive or not. That's kind of your preference. Maybe you don't see PC as a competition to Xbox, so you don't mind if they're there, but other people do. Either way, I'm sure they'll show off a bunch of games kind of in that light, but there won't be as much interact. Little bit away, 4 months or so, but still, it's always fun on the lead up, figuring things out. You know, are there going to be any surprise announcements? Always a good time, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. Myself looked at Hearthstone and said this at least makes sense on the Switch because, well, one, a lot of cell phone games, of course, and games based in the Google Play Store or iOS seem to be making their way to the Switch because it's ARM-based, much like those, so it's probably pretty easy to move it over, as we've seen with a lot of stuff. Gear Club is a great example of one that they actually expanded on, despite it really being like a free-to-play game at the time. So here we go. No Hearthstone, apparently. I was a little surprised, to be honest. I thought that made a ton of sense on the Switch. It has a touchscreen, or of course the controllers, but Power Up Gaming actually asked them, said, hey, what are your plans here for the Switch? And they said this: there are no plans to move Hearthstone to the Nintendo Switch. That's Dean Ayala. And yeah, I'm a little surprised too. I thought this made perfect sense, actually. I think that was a perfect fit. Listen, Nintendo fans seem to want every game on the Switch. That's not going to happen. Obviously, not every game is going to go to the Switch, just like not every game goes to the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox. Some have actually picked the Switch even as an exclusive system. Sure, that's kind of more so, I guess, some indie developers, but still, there are games that just don't go to every system. And in this case, I was just a little surprised because I thought this made sense for the Switch, but I guess they're just not either. They could also be playing coy, of course, but more than likely they just have no plans. That's just the way it is. Maybe they're not talking to Nintendo or something, but we'll see going forward. Maybe they changed their mind. This was kind of still the Also kind of the same attitude from Rocket League developers before their reveal. So, I mean, you never know. We'll just have to see. Next up, we did get a reveal trailer that told us all about the release date and the price for Fear Effect Sedna. Now, if you're not sure about this game, we talked about it later last year, where they told us that this game was coming out. It was going to the Switch, the PlayStation 4, the Xbox, PC. It's going to everything. And people who were fans of Fear Effect on the PS1 a long time ago got pretty excited. They showed it off a bit on Steam, and yeah, it's an isometric style game. I don't know, I have to play it. It's a little weird looking to me, but you're seeing some of the gameplay here in the trailer. It is coming out March 6, 2018, of course, so actually in a couple weeks it'll be out. Coming out $19.99. This is for the PS4, the Xbox One, the Switch, and the PC. It's going to be on Steam. They've actually, I think, even did like a demo through Steam for people to try out months ago. So it's going to be something different, I think, for Fear Effect fans, or maybe you didn't play the series and you're going to jump in here. I just don't expect like a, big blockbuster game or anything. It looks like almost more like a single A or double A game, I guess, more close to its expenses. And the development, or at least the porting from the PS1 to the Nintendo 64 of 40 Winks was just cut. They just weren't going to do it. It probably wasn't going to sell as well as they wanted it to. So really just cut your losses while you can. Well, it looks like this Kickstarter is at least looking to bring it back and actually release it as a cartridge, boxed and everything, to fans. So this on NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy Advance, Atari Jaguar, and even digital releases for PC. So they have some business background. They have an idea of how to make this happen, get it to the finish line. It's not like people apparently who just show up, they're working out of their garage to get this done. This seems more like a legitimate Kickstarter than one that people kind of put up as like a hook. I think that'd be a really cool feeling to have. So I'll look into this. I've played 40 Winks way back in the day. I rented it on the PS1, and it was okay, I guess. It's not like an amazing game or anything in the US and everything. I would like to see some other ones do the same thing. I know Terra Enigma would be a really cool one to do on the Super Nintendo in the US. I think that would get a great backing if they could get the rights for that, but it might be a little difficult. Next up, let's dive a little bit into the realm of Ryzen chips from AMD. Now, we've talked about at times how expensive video cards have become just from the cryptocurrency mining that's going on, where people are buying up, 10 video cards at a time to put in their mining rig. Well, interestingly enough, AMD released Ryzen APUs. They were all reviewed yesterday, and wow, I was a little surprised at some of these chips. Here, there are two right now. You're going to see a chart here. This is from Anantech. Did a great job kind of outlining everything. The Ryzen 5 2400G, and then the Ryzen 3 2200G with the Ryzen 5 with Vega 11, and then the Ryzen 3 with Vega 8, a quad core with their technical hyper-threading. I guess they call them SMTs, and then the standard quad core on the right. They retail for $169 for the Ryzen 5 and then $99 for the Ryzen 3. And you're going to be a little surprised at how they perform. You can actually get decent performance out of these if you're not really looking to play the big games. They were talking about Overwatch, for example, playing at like low settings of 1080 at like almost 60 frames per second. They even fired up Crysis because that's, of course, the question everyone asks, how well play Crysis. Very high, got roughly 26, 27 frames per second. And trust me, for an APU running off of basically memory on the main board that the system uses for its everyday tasks, which they're using DDR4 memory, that is impressive. And I have to say, integrated visuals, really integrated video has become so much more powerful than it used to be. These iGPUs are absolutely killing it right now. I mean, they were comparing it to video cards from, 5-6 years ago, and they're as powerful, or in some cases more powerful. And it's just insane to see where these have gotten to. Now, of course, AMD is the leader here with their Ryzen APUs, and it's going to be really interesting going forward. This, I think, fills a need right now for people who want a budget system. According to them, is comparable in CPU tasks to the i5-8600. So this is really cool. I like what AMD is doing right now, and honestly, for $170, you can pretty much take care of both. Play some of the lower end games, indie games, no problem. But the fact that you can play Overwatch on there is that's something. In our last bit of news, let's talk a bit about Ubisoft's fiscal quarter earnings that they reported. There was some interesting stuff in there, and we're going to go through it kind of quickly. They talked about how the PlayStation 4 makes up almost half of their sales in games. It was about 44 to 45%, a little down. I think it's down from like 46% last year, but you can see the Switch is also down because Mario Rabbids, of course, came out last quarter, and that's fair. And then, of course, Microsoft did jump up because of Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed for them did very well, very well. Like overall, everything for that game has helped them. I mean, micro revenue that they're making from people right now, to the point where they even showed a chart that showed AAA developers from 2005 that were releasing AAA games yearly, and then they showed a chart now. This does not include first-party companies, just in case you're wondering, so it won't include Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo, but they're talking about AAA developers who are third-party that release games yearly, and you can see they say it's shrunken to 4 at this point. It includes them, of course, Take-Two, EA, and it's very interesting ability. Just because of this, when the PS4 and the Xbox One, for example, launched and more people were online and they were used to subscription services, you can see the trend. They became much more profitable. They are on the exact same wavelength here as someone like EA, who is all about the microtransactions, who is really excited for loot boxes, different way for the Switch. They cannot be happier with how Mario Rabbids performed, and it sounds like they're going to be pushing more and more into that. I'm just a little curious where things like Steep have gotten. Of course, going to release third-party games always on PS4 and Xbox, and it seems like they'll work more and more with Nintendo going forward. We'll just see what else they have in mind for the Switch, because we know then they really start to lose it when you get down to royalties with Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and that is mostly for cost of goods. So when you're packaging, shipping, all this stuff, you can see how much that physical actually hurts them, whereas with digital, they just have 30% come off, goes to, of course, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, whoever, and even probably Steam. If they want to do that, I know they're doing the Ubisoft store, though, now. With that case, they actually make a lot more through digital distribution than they do physical, and they seem to be very happy that their digital distribution has been growing as much as it has. They're talking about jumps of 8 to 9% every quarter from last year, so this is very interesting to see. And then you can see just how much they lose when they go through physical, where they have to do the distributor, and then they still have to pay Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft royalties, and then of course their cost of goods on the services. It's very interesting to see this. I like to see a little more of the back end if I can, just to try to figure out how some of this stuff is affected in sales. But you know, you learn something, I guess, and Ubisoft had no problem just telling us everything. So at least they're being extremely transparent about why they want microtransactions, why they want recurring revenue to succeed. Ubisoft, I think you can do it. I'm going to tell you this now. I think you can set the trend. You can get rid of that $60 price. I know companies are worried about doing this, but I would like to see one of them, any of them, experiment with this idea. You don't even have to get rid of it right away. Pull like an NFL 2K5 and take one of your games and just drop it to $20 and see if your recurring revenue for that title goes up. I just want to see if it would work. That's all. You don't have to make it free to play. I think that $20 entry fee will at least make it more manageable to get in than the $60 fee that people have to pay now to then be a part of the recurring revenue journey. So at least somebody, and I think Ubisoft can do it. I would love to see them take a shot with something. I'm not sure which game, which franchise, maybe a new one even. You know what, if they had come to the table and said Assassin's Creed is $20, they would have sold more, but I don't know. I would have liked to have seen it, and I hope they try to do it, because I think they can take a shot at it, but we'll have to see. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for Newswave today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave a bunch of comments down below about everything we talked about. Maybe we'll talk about the E3 plan that we have here, the floor plan. Maybe you picked out a few of a couple different companies that you like and you want to visit if you're going, or maybe you're kind of interested in why one company's is really small. The Microsoft one to me makes sense. Like I said, they're going to have a whole presentation, a whole show away from E3 like they did last year, and that'll probably just be there with smaller, a couple things, then they'll push the third parties with branding all over E3. But let me know what you think about the plan. Let me know what you think about the new APUs from AMD and their Vega line being a part of it. Maybe you're really excited to see an APU actually do pretty good. It's definitely for budget gamers who don't want to have to spend $500 on a video card now that's mid-range. It's crazy out there when it comes to these video cards. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.